Welcome to the Lifeshine Generosity Project, where we promote reckless generosity. My name's John Whitt, and I'm your host. And we encourage our guests to shine their light bright on their good deeds and glorify our Father in heaven. Today our guest is Dereck Wong, and Dereck is the Southern California and Las Vegas area director for Links Players. Now, Links Players is a ministry to golfers, and I'm a golfer. And to be honest with you, Links Players is the foundational reason for my transformation. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't learn about grace and mercy and all of that until I was 52. And I thank God for that opportunity that I received back in 1952. And I'm very, very excited to introduce Dereck Wong as our guest today. Dereck, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you, John.
So Dereck, I'm going to give you the glory and the opportunity to kind of share what Links Players is. What do you do? Who do you serve? What are the kind of problems and issues and challenges that you deal with?
Sure. Well, Links Players was actually started in the early 80s by two PGA professionals, Jim Hiskey and Wally Armstrong. And they felt like there was a need out there as professional golfers, how they would use their platform as professional golfers to reach golfers like you and I. And so they would set up these fellowships as they traveled around, the country. And through that, Links Players was born. And I've been involved with Links Players actually probably for over 25 years and got their newsletter, and that was called the Links Letter, which was a magazine now that they created actually in 2000. And those are magazines of just articles of players on the tour, both men and women. And those are just a good vehicle that we would give to people. And then when the website became very popular, we created the Links Players website, so linksplayers.com. And we have a lot of articles on the website of just different players, but also different studies. One of the things that we really push is fellowship. And Links, L-I-N-K-S, as you know, our logo,
right, yeah,
has 5 T's. And the pillars, as we call it, the 5 pillars, L is love God and others. I is integrate Christ's reign and integrity into all of life. The N is networking together through the game of golf. And then K is kindling compassion for poor and needy. And I think when we think poor and needy, we think automatically financial.
Right.
But I say poor and needy in spirit. And that is something that where we get to really minister and reach out to men and women like yourself when you first heard about Links Players, which is poor and needy in spirit. And I remember you always said, one thing you never realized is that you had a hole in your heart. And
well,
that was
yeah,
big.
and so, life is life.
Yeah.
And I had my issues and challenges, and when I discovered that concept of grace and mercy, and it was actually Links Players that was so helpful because it was in the golfing community, a place that I was comfortable, people I knew, I could ask questions, two-way conversation. It wasn't the same as going to church, because church is kind of a one-way message, right? And so I could ask questions and educate myself. And there's a whole story around why I was doing that. As a relationship with my daughter was really important to me to go down that path. And if you're interested in that story, you can check it out on lifeshine.live. We'll give you details on that later. But that was amazing. And and I think for golfers, right, these are, especially if you're at a private club, right, money is not really the big issue. It's all that other stuff. And that's where I think the spiritual gap, the spiritual hole is so big.
Yeah.
Because I certainly didn't know how to fill it. I didn't know what it was. So.
Yeah. And I think for you, as a good example, the S is sharing Christ with others. And when you got to meet one of our Links Players on the golf course, of course, our tagline is changing the conversation. And what he did with you was he did change the conversation, if I remember.
Oh, it was. We're on this is so vivid. We're on the 16th hole, hitting our approach shot to the green, and there's people on the green. We're waiting for it to clear. And he turns to me, Richard Jackson turns to me and says, "What church do you go to?" Now, he doesn't know any of my backstory and why I'm interested and why that makes sense or why that's going to resonate with me, but he just says, "What church do you go to?" And I explained that, I didn't go to church, no pros and cons, just didn't grow up in the church. And then he explained Links Players. And in the back of my mind, I actually was seeking, I was looking for help in this space, but I didn't know where to go, and it just kind of popped up. This is God doing his thing. And the very next week, I was playing golf, and another guy asked me the exact same question on the first hole. So I literally have the same conversation 2 weeks in a row. But it doesn't, I'm not here. Lifeshine generosity doesn't exist without that transformation from Links players way back then.
Yeah, no, your story is very, I love it because it's kind of what I call our sweet spot. When you golf, you talk about the golf club having a sweet spot. And I would say Links players, that's our sweet spot, is how do we reach to men and women that are in these golf clubs that maybe never gone to church or never heard, about Jesus, and yet they don't want to be, pound over the head with it, but it's through relationships, and we're all about relationships with each other, number one, but most importantly, a relationship with Jesus Christ.
And again, for me, it was an opportunity to, and I knew some of these people, I just didn't know their faith, I didn't know their religion. This was an opportunity to, ask questions and get deeper answers, and it was really, well, again, without it, I wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. So Links, acronym, and the types of challenges. My challenge in particular, I was seeking. I needed to get smarter about the Bible. I needed to understand more. But I'm not the only one. I mean, there are a lot of challenges that Links solves.
Yeah. One of the things we do is we have a daily devotional as a part of a tool or a resource that we send out Monday through Friday, and you can register. It's free on linksplayers.com, and just go to devotionals and subscribe. And Monday through Friday, you get a devotional that talks about golf and God. And what people learn, because I love the game of golf, the analogies. There's so many great parallels with life and golf. And so, and of course, a lot of our fellowships use the Friday devotional because we make it really easy for someone that we would call facilitate. Not have to be a Bible study teacher or a leader. You could facilitate and really go through the devotional, and then we have questions, right, that anybody can answer. Like, what is your favorite golf course? Or, like this week was like, do you ever dream you would be in a major, championship,
Yeah, that's a dream.
Yeah. And so those are things that we try to engage both men and women in the fellowships, even though they're not knowledgeable of the Bible, but they can communicate and talk about golf.
Well, golf has so many life lessons, and biblically, that's what the Bible's all about, is life lessons. Mm-hmm. I've often referred to it in my coaching profession as the original mental health book, because all the different experiences that the characters in the Bible go through are just the same kind of stuff that we're all dealing with ourselves. And how do we resolve it? What's the process? I mean, so, you want to set up instructions on how things work. That's a really good tool for that. In addition to the concept of faith and, the promise that Jesus brings. Mm. The process for finding or joining or becoming a member engaged with Links players, how does that work?
Well, a lot of it is all about relationships. And one of the things somebody asked me the other day that was a pastor of literally, he's connected with a church of 200 churches. And one of his pastor friends says, how come I've never heard about Links players? And I said, sometimes we're the best kept secret because it's really a one-on-one relationship first. It's like meeting someone on the golf course and telling them about Links players. And then secondly is saying, hey, we have fellowships in these different clubs. And the whole idea is inviting one by one. And it's not something we go out and advertise or promote. It's something that you have to find the right people in a club that have a heart to say, yeah, I want to start a Links fellowship at my club. Or they've experienced a Links fellowship like yourself at another club, and understanding that it's non-threatening. That's one of the things we want to make sure. It's really about, again, establishing relationships with different golfers at your club. And one of the things I tell a lot of our Links players is that we talk about the harvest field. In Luke 10:2 talks about the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. And I tell a lot of our Links guys, you don't have to go to China, being Chinese, or Africa, but right here in your own backyard at your golf club, that's a great harvest field. And so why not use that as a setting where you can invite your buddies that you play golf with to come to a Links Fellowship. And we are intentional about calling it a Links Fellowship because it's really about the fellowship. And one thing people say is, well, you're very religious, Dereck. I said, no, I'm about relationships, not about religion. Jesus was about relationships.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I believe Links players is really, again, a safe environment for a lot of men and women who've maybe either got turned off from the church growing up or have never been to church, but now they can come to a place that they can feel comfortable.
Yeah, the golf course is a club, is a comfortable spot. And again, I had met many of these guys in events or tournaments or just even played golf with them before, but I just had never had this kind of a conversation with before. So it was really powerful for me. So a quick question: How many fellowships do we have? Where are they?
So we're across the United States. We're around 300 fellowships and growing. One of the things, again, as we call it, it's about really, we call it organic because it's really up to the Lord bringing the right people. And of course, more and more people are aware of now Links players. And as they do, they'll call one of the regional directors and they can go to our website. And our whole thing is we're here to help them start the fellowship. And once they get it going, what's great about it, we use a word called sustainability. And they're sustainable because they're run by the members. You don't have to depend on a pastor leading it or a certain leader leading it. It's all run by the members. And that's what I love about the fellowships that I get to be a part of, because these are all running and, God willing, I'll be here for a while. But if he takes me home tomorrow, these groups will still continue to meet.
Yeah. So, success story. Something special, and I'm certainly you've got several of them. Can you share one?
Sure. For me, I've been in business. I had my own business for over 30 years. I was really blessed to be in an industry that was growing, which was the video game industry.
Okay.
And for me, it was like, okay, life was easy, playing golf, and success was there. And when Links players, I had known about Links players, and just so happened I was at one of our clubs that I belonged to, and I went to a study, and I said, wow, this is great, meeting at a country club, because I was always involved in men's small groups,
church
at my
groups.
church, and Promise Keepers, and so I was involved in that. But to see men at the time they were meeting in a locker room, and here in Palm Desert, and sure enough, I got a chance to meet our president, Jeffrey Cranford, and at the time our CEO, Jeff Hopper, and I had mentioned that I was serving on the elder board at our church, and I just rotated off, and they go, oh, we're looking for some new board members. And so they invited me, and that's when I really fell in love with the ministry. And then, of course, with my sales background, it was like, okay, how do we expand? How do we get this going? And this is where God really intervened. We were looking for some regional directors. We had our regional director in Texas, which was doing well, and we decided to hire a guy in Southeast and Southwest. And of course, I opened my mouth and said, oh, that'd be a fun job. And Jeff
and
Cranford,
they said, you're welcome.
Yeah, George. And I go, no, I don't think so. But I said something that I think all of us should be willing to hear. It said calling. And I said, okay, I tell you what, give me a month, and let me see if this is truly where God is calling me. And sure enough, I said, give me a month, right? So first week, I asked my wife, by the way.
Yeah.
And I being a sales guy, I said, I'm not going to sell my wife that, hey, I want this job, but I want God to speak to her if I should take this job. And sure enough, 2 weeks go by. I asked my wife, not sure. Third week goes by, and literally, I get up 4 o'clock in the morning. It was like you speaking to me now. And literally, Jesus is saying, get out of the boat. And of course, the inside joke is, I also said, feed my sheep. And my friends at Links Players said, what is, get out of the boat, thinking of fish and sheep. That's the inside joke.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, that for me, it was about feeding the sheep. Was my passion is how do I help literally men like yourselves grow in their walk with Jesus and their faith. And so I'm thinking, okay, and I hear that. And that morning I asked my wife, I go, hey, where are you with me coming on board with Links Players? And she goes, I've been praying, and yeah, if you feel called, let's go.
So it happened.
15 years now.
It happened.
Yeah.
Well, that's so often the case. So really, if somebody was interested at learning more about Links Players, go to linksplayers.com. There's certainly, like, I know from my club, you don't even necessarily have to play golf, but if you like to play golf, you want to learn, you're certainly welcome to come visit us at Oregon Golf Club. I think you could visit any one of the fellowships in that fashion. And then you've got tools on how to start a Links fellowship at each of the clubs. So you could test one out, so to speak, and then figure it out and then go start your own.
Yeah. I think the whole idea is it's about inclusive, not exclusive. And I think Jesus was that way. He was all about being inclusive. He would go out to wherever parts of the world and just, be able to just share his love. And that's really, I believe, what Links Players and what Links fellowships are about doing, is really reaching out to as many as they can.
Have you ever been surprised, or has anybody told you about how surprised they were about something that they received because they joined Links Players?
Yeah, in fact, like I said, it's organic because you just never know. And my role being 15 years and what I am blessed to do with Links Players as an area director is meeting different men and women. And sometimes it'll be like months, and believe it or not, in one case, it was like 14 years, where finally it was kind of like one of the things of timing. And that's why a lot of times we say it's God's timing, not our timing.
It's God's will.
Yeah, and so we can't put a timeline on when someone is ready and not ready.
But then 14 years go by and all of a sudden they're ready.
Yeah, and it was because of our logo. This gentleman was playing in a golf tournament, and he noticed the logo, and he said, Links Players. And he said, oh, do you know Dereck Wong? And sure enough, they started talking. And just so happened this gentleman just retired, did really well, and he just retired, and he said, I'm looking for something to do. And sure enough, he called me up, and I remembered him from 14 years ago up in the Bay Area, and sure enough, he said, I'm ready to get something going. And sure enough, they're going, and men are coming to the fellowship. I even got one of the wives called me a couple months ago and say, I want to start a women's fellowship too. And so we have women's fellowships that meet also in the clubs, and that's something that we're looking to grow as a ministry, is really get more women involved with Links Players.
Well, there are women golfers too. I mean, there's really no reason why we can't go down that path.
Yeah.
So, well, if we switch the topic to generosity, I remember when I was developing this podcast, I was developing the generosity, Lifeshine generosity program. I'd reached out to you and I said, so what's the value and the benefit of generosity? And do you remember what you said? You you paraphrased the old bottle recycling model, right? So it used to be, and this is when I was growing up, I'm dating myself obviously, but on the bottle, it would say, on the bottom of the bottle, it would say no deposit, no return. And generosity is how you're making those deposits. And the return is the blessings that come with it. And in your case, right, and you've been generous in many, many cases, what are some of the blessings that you think you've received?
I was on the elder board at our church, and we had this big building campaign, and I remember had to fill out a commitment card. And at the time, business was good, life was good, and I thought, okay, let's see where God, sort of like what I said in the scriptures about test me. So I said, okay, Lord. So I put this number down, and I'm praying with my wife, and we'll say, okay, we'll see what God does. And sure enough, it was kind of like when you wrote the check. It was kind of like, the whole idea of being, generosity is about your heart, about saying that, you want to do it from your heart, not because you have to, it's because you want to. And for me, when we wrote it, we were so excited that we were able to do it. And it was over above, your normal tithing, which obviously we talk about tithing. But for me and my wife, it was something that we got to be a part of. And I think that's the whole idea of generosity is when you give from your heart, you're part of that whole thing that you're giving to. It's not just writing a check.
Right, you're in this case, you're part of that capital campaign to expand the church.
And he talks about being a cheerful giver, and I think that's what the whole idea of being a cheerful giver is. You're giving it because after that you feel really cheerful, and God has blessed me more than I can ever imagine, and I would tell you that was something that for me and my wife was really a step, a big step for us in our journey.
Well, you were talking about Malachi. I forget the verse. I'm not as nearly as
Malachi
good at
3:10.
Yeah.
Test me.
This is test me, right? God says, test me, and I will make it happen. I don't know the exact words, but in this case, you did. And was there anything that happened to the business or to your life? I mean, other than the fact that you had a lot of joy from just being able to make this contribution, which I think is worth a lot all by itself. Did you notice some things happen where did business change? Did things happen, or do anything happen there?
Well, I think what really more changed was that God does provide, and God is faithful, and it's for us to just trust Him and test Him. That's the whole thing about Malachi 3. And he says, why? And nowhere else in the Bible does it say test Him. By the way, in this verse is very important because he says, test me these things and see that, and he talks about tithes and offering, and people say, what is a tithe? Of course, we say it's a tenth, and I tell people, just start at 1%,
is what it is. Yeah.
2%, it doesn't matter, but start somewhere. And you'll see God's blessings, by the way, they're not always financial. Blessings was in our marriage, blessings was in our children, blessings was with relationships, and for me, more important, in ministry and coming on board with Lynx players. And that all was kind of the journey of the beginning of how I got to where I'm at today.
Yeah. It is surprising, generosity, living in the law of abundance, so to speak, because God He provides, and trusting Him. Sometimes that's the biggest check you ever wrote, and then God somehow makes it work out. So.
And the check is really, I think, it's just really the testing. Even in the Bible, it talks about who gave the most. But you look at the Pharisees, but it was the widow's mite. It was the lady that gave. For her, it was a lot, but in regards to the amount, it wasn't a lot if you compare it. But for her, it was all she had.
As a percentage of what she had, she gave, and she gave from the heart. Yeah. So let's shift into concept of non-financial generosity.
Yeah, what I learned too is your time and your talent. And one of the things what we're doing at Lynx Players is we have a lot of men and women that have been very successful from the business standpoint. And how do you give it back? We talk about pay it forward. And so one of the things we look at is mentoring. We started a program called the EE Project, which is the relationship between Elisha and Elijah. And the whole idea is that there are a lot of men and women that have a lot of talent that they've been through both ups and downs. We learn probably more from our failures than we do from our successes.
Definitely.
And so what we've been working with is an organization called College Golf Fellowship. A lot of the men and women tried to they played college golf, but they weren't good enough to play professionally. So now they're pursuing their careers, what they majored in. And like, for example, accounting. If someone wants to be a CPA, so we try to connect them with someone that's been a CPA or a CFO of a company. What better experience that you would have someone come alongside, like what you do with coaching, is to coach them not only in their profession, but also in their spiritual journey.
Just in life.
Yeah.
Right, because if I knew then what I know now, it would be different. But it is life, So you've got the mentorship that's going on, and that's certainly a non-generous contribution or non-financial contribution. But I think in terms of, especially today, kindness and attentiveness, saying please and thank you, and it seems to be in short supply these days.
Yeah, and I think what we see in golf, though, which is obviously why it's such a great sport, the whole area of the integrity side, with links, it's the whole idea with the eye, the integrity. And what I love about golf is that when my son was growing up playing golf, he learned to say, hello, hello, Mr. Whitt.
Yeah.
Not hello, John, but hello, Mr. Whitt. And as he grew up, he learned those things from playing golf and being around golfers.
Yeah, just a lot of courtesy, and golf is made up. There's a lot of golf etiquette out there. Yeah. Shifting again, because Links is expanding, and they've got. You mentioned earlier the women's fellowships.
Yeah, women. It's. Unfortunately, golf, has really kind of been geared more towards men. But my wife is a golfer, and women is growing. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, a lot of people figured out, hey, golf is a sport they can golf.
Golf, you can still play,
right?
Yeah. You still go put a tee in the ground and play.
So it's become a very, very popular sport. And what we have started was really be intentional about getting women's fellowships going. And once they get going, I mean, I got to tell you, they grow faster than the men's fellowships, because women they're just born to just gather, and get together. I mean, we have a group here at one of our clubs, and the women have a Christmas party. It is like everything is to the tens, the food, the gifts, the clothing. I mean, and it's neat. And actually what we've done in some of our clubs is we've actually asked our men and women fellowships to have a Christmas party together, and it's kind of cool to see what's happening. As some of the women's don't go to their women's fellowship, and some of the men's don't go to the men's fellowship. So there's all of a sudden this community that's happening within the golf club of people meeting other people that say, "Oh, your wife plays golf? Oh, my wife plays golf." And so it's really neat. As Links players, we try to look at how do we do both men and women, and also what we call mixed groups, which are men and women or couples, and then you have some men that are basically bachelors, or some women that are same. And so we don't want to just say couples.
We
try to create
situations,
mixed groups too.
Arrangements.
And golf is the commonality. I mean, really, golf is kind of brings us all together.
Yeah.
And through that we all.
Golf and relationships.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so there's one other thing I wanted to catch before we wrap, and you had mentioned a term that stuck with me. It was God winks.
Yeah, I think in our lives, right, John, you've experienced too, is that certain, as I go and do different things, God just shows you as a God wink. He shows up.
He shows up. It's like, wow, look at that.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes it could be a challenge, or and all of a sudden you run into someone that you haven't seen in a while, whether it's on the golf course or wherever it may be, and all of a sudden that's that one person you needed to hear an encouraging word from, or you needed,
or he needed to hear an encouraging word from you.
Yeah.
It is just amazing how often that happens. And we don't plan it, but it's just there, and off we go. And you can look back later and say, well, how the heck did we end up in the same place at the same time when we started out, X amount of miles away from each other?
And that's when God winks and saying, I'm there for you and always be there with you.
That's when God winks. I like that. Dereck, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for everything that you do for Links players. It's an outstanding group, and it's made a huge difference in my life, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share what Links Players is really all about, and tell your story and share your stories of generosity. Very much appreciated.
It's a pleasure and blessing to be with you, John.
All right, thank you. Okay, for those of you that have watched us today, thank you for joining us. If you have a minute or a second even, take some time and be generous and go down and leave us a comment below and push that little subscribe button. If you'd like to connect with other members of the Lifeshine community that are practicing a focus of generosity, you can join us at www.lifeshine.live. So thanks again for joining us, and may your light continue to shine brighter on your good deeds.